popping. Miss Evans on the beat, so tap in. You got options, but you better pass my class, no flopping. Gon' log in every day, every morning I'm watching. Yeah, we virtual and you know it's up, so we about to take it up a notch. Yeah, Monroe is the best, no comparing.
Thank you so much to our everyone has been looking at that video all day. It has gone viral all over the world, and I'm happy to say that it is a very good friend of mine, one of my sorors, her daughter, a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, who is a part of that video, and I thank her so much for allowing me to use it as part of the opening. Now, after a summer-long debate over whether or not to open schools, school systems, colleges, and universities from across the globe are now shifting their entire education experience to a virtual platform. This new reality created an urgency for parents, educators, as well as students to feel supported by their respective education systems. As a professional in the ministry, I question the church leaders across denominations. What are they doing to encourage or to see even support or encourage collaboration between their local churches and other organizations to support the communities in this very important issue? That these needs have some relativeness to the thriving and the children and the families within our communities. And with sadness, I must say that I get very little response. But on next week's show, we will be talking with some other pastors and getting their perspectives on this very issue. And if any of my ministerial colleagues would like to comment on our live show this evening in response, please let me know so that I can include you in this broadcast. But what some educators are finding, what they actually have realized, is that virtual learning on all levels of education, from kindergarten, preschool, all the way to college and universities, present many benefits that in some cases equal the in-person platform. Well, tonight I have invited a group of educators from across the educational globe to share their perspective on just some ways that we can benefit and offer some benefit on how parents as well as other educators can thrive in the virtual classroom. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Dr. Ashley Strong Green, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your experience and who you are, and just tell us tell the audience what it is that you would like for them to know about you.
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to an important and timely discussion, Dr. White. I'm Ashley Strong Green. I am the distance education coordinator at Augusta Technical College. I have been in education for about 16 years. I started in a K-12 environment teaching a grant-based health science curriculum. I moved into higher education in 2005. I was at an HBCU for a couple of years, and for the last 12 years, I've been in technical education. I actually made a transition out of the classroom and into this distance education role at the beginning of the pandemic, in part because I saw that the skill set that I had related to distance education would be better served in helping other educators figure out the best ways to survive the pandemic and hopefully to help students thrive in it. So now I'm in a role where I basically spend a lot of time helping people figure out how to teach the best online and virtual classes that they can.
Awesome. That is awesome. And that is exactly what the purpose of tonight's segment is to really focus on and offer some resources and support to parents, teachers, and educators, as well as talk a little bit about what some other organizations like the church could do. Dr. Andrea Lewis, can you just kind of give us who you are and tell everybody about yourself? Dr. Lewis?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Dr. White for another opportunity to join you on Perspectives On. It is a delight to be here with you all. I am currently the chair and an associate professor at Spelman College in the Department of Education, where I love helping to nurture and develop our future educators. Prior to that, I was a director of Spelman's Campus Child Development Center. And then before that, I spent 12 years in Atlanta Public Schools as a teacher, reading coach, and instructional specialist. It is a delight to be with you all and to share. And Dr. White, since you started off representing your sorority in the intro, I would be remiss if I did not do the same and represent the first and the finest Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And give a shout out to my soror, Kamala Harris, who accepted the nomination for Vice President of these United States of America.
I was trying to find the mute button. I couldn't find it. But anyway.
No matter the letters, Greeks do it better. Nothing but support data over here.
Lisa Dorsey, please. Most definitely, I'm so glad to have you here tonight. Tell us about who you are, where you are, and what your experience in terms of what you have to offer us for tonight.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I am Lisa Dorsey. Thank you, Dr. White, for having me join in this conversation. I was so excited from last weekend. I'm always willing to just discuss education and what I can do to better improve my craft and to offer something to the students. I am an educator. I've been teaching for 20 years, primarily in Georgia, but I have recently relocated back home to Jacksonville, Florida, Duval County. So I'm currently teaching 5th grade English Language Arts and Social Studies. And in the spring, we were all charged with transitioning to distance learning. And I actually enjoyed distance learning with my students in the spring. So when the opportunity presented itself again due to the pandemic for us to do distance learning start in the fall, I jumped on it and decided that it was something I wanted to do again. So I am, trying to provide that quality education for those students who feel like they're not ready to return to brick and mortar, and always am looking for ways to engage them and keep their education as rigorous as it would be in the brick and mortar setting. So that's just a little bit about me. And I also represent Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Okay, Dr. Lewis, you're a little outnumbered tonight, but it's okay. Reverend Powers. And so everybody that knows me, they know that I talk a lot on the social justice platform. So in addition to addressing these types of issues, I also am critical of the church in terms of what they're doing and what they're saying, and if they're actually activating and doing something in the community, or if they're not, and why. And so I'm always standing and calling the church out on issues that they are quiet about, but they should not be. And so I'm inviting, I'm claiming in advance, the Reverend Dr. Esther Powers to our dialogue, because she brings a perspective on what the church is doing on this very issue in a positive way. And so I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to hear what you have. Reverend Powers, introduce yourselves, tell the audience, who you are and what you bring to this conversation. Thank you.
Well, don't fall off the edge of your seat just yet. My name is Reverend Esther K. Powers. I'm a pastor at Mount Zion AME Church in College Park, Georgia. I'm a career corporate person that has stepped away after 31 years. And it was interesting, as I was driving home, I got the call from my good friend, Reverend Laura Lee White, and asking me to give my perspectives tonight. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I just shared with someone that I'm the person who always challenges the church and seem to always get in trouble with the church because I also call them out and challenge them. And I just think right now we're in a pivotal position as the church. As you know, our churches have closed, they have sheltered in place, and most of our African-American churches still remain closed to what they consider their normal operations of worshiping on Sunday. But I think this is a clarion call for the church to really be the church. We are always challenged that we come in and worship. We have all of the trappings of worship, praise teams, multi-musicals, and we have church anniversaries, choir anniversaries, all these things we do within the walls of the church. But the church walls no longer exist. We have been pushed out. And I think it's the time that we really look at what the call of the church really is all about. And it is not to sit inside. Yes, we give God praise. We come together for fellowship, but then we're called to go and into the community, into the hedges and the byways. And so one of the things that I have always been a proponent of outreach and being involved in the community in which I reside as a pastor and our church sits in. We sit right on Riverdale Road in College Park, and most of the families around us work in various service industry jobs where they don't have the option to stay at home. But now they are in a difficult spot because the kids are home. But they still have to go to work. They don't have unlimited leave. They don't have, some of them don't even have sick leave. We have a parent that is working 3 jobs and none of them are full-time jobs. So one of the things in the midst of all of this, before we went into the pandemic, we were looking at how we could do something for the community with our children. And so now we have created a virtual learning environment where the kids come to our church. And I think that's a call that God has. You know, when the disciples were running the children away, and Jesus said, no,
Not children.
You know, that's right. And bring the children to me, and such as these is the kingdom of heaven. And so I just feel very passionately that this is a time for us to step out and do what God has called us to do. Our kids suffer already from an educational gap, a digital divide, and I am just concerned that it's going to become a cliff. It's going to be something that we will not be able to recover from, truly, if we do not do something in a very proactive way.
And on that note, let us jump right into the discussion. I know I've asked, I've talked to a number of parents, and the biggest concern is that because we have virtual learning in some situations, especially here in the state of Georgia, that there will be a widening of that gap because it's virtual learning and it's not in person. So my question to the educators is, will virtual instruction be able to meet the same academic standards? And if so, how is that based on your methodologies, based on your knowledge? Dr. Green, I think, Dr. Strong Green, I think you may have, because you're a distance learning director, I'll let you lead the answer to that question. And you are on mute. We can't hear you.
So one of the things I feel like I need to preface my comment with is that I work in technical education. And so, a lot of what we do is the bread and butter of what makes the state work. Things like commercial truck driving or welding. We also produce a lot of nursing students. And so I think that when you ask these kinds of questions, you got to be very mindful of like the learning outcomes that you're talking about. If you're talking about things related to like comprehension or analysis, certainly we can do those things virtually. I can teach you history virtually. I think the challenge comes in when we start working on those higher level skills, when we want you to appreciate something, when we want you to be able to produce a kinetic result. And in many cases, especially in higher education, the answer has been no. You know, there are some of our programs where the accrediting bodies have outright said, you can't do this online. You can't teach a person how to fix an airplane online. We need them to learn how to do that on an actual aircraft. And so I think that when we're talking about lower level skills, that it is possible, and that we need to be very careful about some of those more concrete, some of those upper level skills. Now, how do we do that? I think that probably the most important thing that we have to keep in mind is nobody asked for this pandemic, right? Educators don't want it, parents don't want it, students don't want it. And for people who are struggling with the digital divide and who are struggling with not being digital natives, because I really don't think that concept exists, that we have to use multiple means, like multiple means of assessment, multiple means of proving that you know what you know, that for us to be able to achieve these learning outcomes, we're going to have to be able to shift our perspective of how we assess them beyond multiple choice quizzes and beyond, standardized testing, and into ways where we start thinking, here's how you can show me in another way through a project or through some type of kinetic learning, through some of these ways that incorporate a more social presence into learning, the kinds of things that you saw in the intro. You know, I'm not advocating that every student needs to produce a video of that quality to show that they've learned something, but that is a way to demonstrate that you have learned. And it's a way that does so that can keep students engaged, because what we're finding more and more is students aren't leaving education because it's hard. They're leaving it because they don't feel like they're a part of what's going on. So I do think it's possible with lower level taxonomy skills, with things like comprehension or appreciation, to still meet those learning outcomes. But I think when it comes to upper level skills, that you're going to have to change what you're asking people to produce in order to assess that they have learned in this environment.
Gotcha. Understandable. What about you, Dr. Lewis?
I agree with Dr. Strong Green. And then I actually want to put another spin on something she mentioned about the video. She was mentioning the video from the student perspective. Today was actually my first day of class teaching college students, and I teach education majors. And we looked at that video today in class, and we looked at the video and talked about it in terms of building community from a teacher point of view. And I think that right now that's really paramount, is with students in this virtual learning environment, that you find ways as a teacher to build community with your students. And I think that video that the teachers did in South Georgia was an excellent example of collaborating and engagement with their students to try to build some type of relationship with them and getting to know them as a teacher. And so I think that's really key in order for the students to learn in a virtual environment, which is very different for them, that the teachers have to also be engaging and find different ways to keep the students' attention, especially for those who are on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform they're using all day long for these extended amount of time. Students aren't used to being engaged like that in the classroom manner. They're used to being on video games and fast moving and fast paced action. And so teachers just need to use different pedagogies and technologies to keep the students engaged, and again, to build community within the classroom. I think that's really key, especially now.
I think that sounds I think that is very key. And so I hear what you're saying about what the educators need to do, but as what would you offer parents in terms of how they can engage and promote the type of collaboration that you're talking about between students and teachers, how can they participate and enhance the learning experience in the virtual classroom? Lisa Dorsey, would you have anything to offer? I meant to ask you if you had anything to offer for the first question. You say what?
I did want to offer that as a teacher still in the classroom, my perspective would be that I agree with both of them, both of the panelists, because what I feel is that it's the true essence of standards-based instruction. If we are teaching the standards, then you are going to offer students multiple ways of learning. You're going to offer them that engagement. And so the different ways that they produce and show mastery of the standard is available to them. And you can achieve that through virtual learning as well. Some of the platforms that we are using here in Duval County, we're using iReady based instruction for reading and math. It is adaptive for the students. So it is on their level. And as long as they practice those skills, it will adjust to their level. It will adjust up or down based on how well they're practicing each day. And so we recommend that they practice a minimum of 45 minutes per week. So that's really not that much time that they're sitting in front of a screen. If you look at it per day, it's like about 9 minutes per day that they spend working on skills that they would need. We also use Achieve 3000 for reading comprehension, nonfiction text, being able to go in and critically read and analyze a text, which is also adaptive to their lexile level. So those are just some of the platforms that we're using. But in addition to that, looking at the standard and actually teaching the standard, breaking the standard down for them, and allowing them to show different ways of mastery is what standards-based instruction is supposed to look like in the classroom, brick and mortar. So you should be able to offer those same things virtually. To your second question, how do we get our parents involved? I think that to get our parents involved, we have to offer them what the expectations are. So making those standards available to the parents and letting them know where they should be and where you're trying to get them to go is the first step. They need to know what their students are being held accountable for. And then also, what does that look like? So giving them some concrete examples of what it looks like and what you're expecting of their students. Engaging them in parent workshops is a way. So we can have virtual parent workshops and parent meetings. And I know that there are a lot of parents that appreciate that. I know we just started. This was day one for us. The students just returned today, but I had orientation earlier this week. And out of my 20 students, I had 19 parents on my virtual orientation. They want to know what their kids will be learning and how they will be learning so that they can help them. Today for day one, I had again 19 out of the 20 students online, and almost all of the parents were in the background. So the parents being engaged in that way will assist with the learning process as well.
Now, we did have one question for you. Have you ever heard of Newsleah? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. That might be. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's News ELA, and it is actually a good source for students because it is comprehension based. they have really stepped up News ELA since it first started, because now it includes all genres of literature to engage the students. It's on their level, so you can assign the students the articles, and then they have comprehension questions to go along with it. There's also another platform called Common Lit, which is also excellent for the students that is virtual. But if you want to kind of get away from just the sit at the screen and read the article and do things as what we saw in the video to engage the students over in the spring, my students had scavenger hunts where they had to find things and show the connection from what we read in the text. We participated in a novel study, and many of my students actually enjoyed the novel study. We read A Long Walk to Water, so we learned about the water crisis in the Sudan, and we talked about how it was affecting us today, even here in Florida, and what we can do to conserve and preserve water. How do we use water every day? I was able to go out and show them my pool and how I use water for recreation and entertainment, and how does that affect our daily water supply, because I have to fill my pool to get in. So just offering the kids things that they see day to day will allow them to learn in a different way. And that, to me, is what standards-based instruction is. And if we're doing it in the brick and mortar, we can do it virtually as well.
Right. Agreed.
Dr. Laura Lane, I just wanted to say something because I do have to jump off for a 7:00 meeting.
Okay.
I just noticed in the 2 weeks that we have been doing the Virtual Learning Academy at Serve First, it varies very much from instructor to instructor. And it clearly comes across with the comfort level of the teacher with the digital tools, whether it's Zoom or Google Classroom and using Google Docs. And I think it has to be a level of give and take where the students have to get used to dealing with everything online. We had a student today that was very sort of down and out. She was not at the Virtual Learning Academy yesterday. And so she's learning how to use Google Docs. And her teacher had told her to underline something in the Google Docs, which she was at home by herself. She didn't know how to do it. And because she didn't do it correctly, the teacher basically said, well, none of your work will count. And so she was very despondent today, didn't really want to get online. And we had an offline conversation with the teacher, and the teacher said she would think about allowing her to resubmit it because we showed her how to underline items on Google Docs. So I think there's a learning curve on both sides. And there has to be some level of appreciation for that technology curve.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. To that, I would also be critical of the school systems spending most of the summer in dialogue, in dialogue, whether or not, in terms of, are we going to open? We're not going to open, or if we're going to do in person, and not enough time was given to training, not enough time was
absolutely
to preparing for the inevitable. And I feel like, that the most famous phrase is "listen to the science." The most famous phrase I've heard politicians use is "listen to the science." Well, the science has been telling us this since the inception of this pandemic, that it was not going to be over with before the end of this year. And so I feel like education system leaders, even on the college and university level, were fully aware, and this is not a surprise. And so I think a lot of energy should have been put into that rather than, are we going to open, not going to open?
Yeah.
Are we going to play football? We're not going to play football. And
I think they spent more time deciding about football than they did about education. But and it's clearly a difference. I also serve as director of recruitment and community engagement for a local private high school, a Jesuit high school, and we were very intentional about preparing for this. from day one, because of course we're not held to the government regulations in a lot of areas. And I think in a lot of instances, a lot of our public education facilities, they were, because it's so politically driven, so they could only do so much because the next layer above them they were not doing what they should do. And so I think somewhere somebody just thought, oh, this is not going to be real. It's going to be over by by the time school starts. And I think some counties prepared definitely better here in the metro Atlanta area. I know Clayton County has always come under a lot of scrutiny for their education system in the past, but
Okay, it looks like Reverend Powers is taking an early exit, an early technical exit, and which is just fine. But yes, a lot of school systems did prepare, did have a conversation. Most did not. And so, that's why we're here. That's why we have these incidents where some, and I am a substitute teacher for Atlanta Public Schools, and I was in a training on yesterday where, we were all instructed that if the technology fails, that's one thing. But if the student is not able to input their information, or, something happens in that regard, then we are to act accordingly and not necessarily include the work. So, that's pretty much an issue. Ladies, we do have.
Can you say that again? Are you saying that if the student doesn't do the work, you are to not accept the work?
Right. So in other words, if the student, if it calls for, if I say, go find something yellow and show it and hold it up. And then, this is just a hypothetical. It's not something that's concrete. But if they don't, let's say hypothetically, they go get something red, or they don't get anything at all, or they turn their camera off, then we can't record. There's nothing for us to measure whether or not they understand what color is yellow or not. And so in that case, they would not receive the credit, because we can't. There's nothing that they're presenting that we can actually measure in terms of their performance. So we have Reverend Powers. Okay, all right, welcome back, Reverend Powers. I didn't know if you were trying to take an early technical exit.
No, actually, it's storming really bad here in Cobb County, and all of a sudden it was just like the lights flickered. I guess God spoke, and I went offline and had to get back on. But
okay.
I did just want to say,
well, it just made its way to Augusta because the same thing just happened here.
But I am gonna drop off, Dr. Lally. This is a very important conversation, and I look forward to engaging it even further, hopefully on next week. But I think it just, as you say, some of the resources were ill spent when we should have been preparing for this day, because we knew it was coming. So thank you for having me. And it was great chatting with everyone. And let's continue to press forward and make sure our children are taken care of.
All right. Thank you so much.
Nice meeting you, Dr. Reverend Powers.
All right.
Will see you on next week.
Will do.
Now, we have Dr. Crystal Conigland that has joined us, and she is an educator. Now, Dr. Conigland, I need you to just briefly introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you bring to this discussion on thriving in the virtual classroom. Can you hear me?
Well, first I want to correct. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First, not a doctor yet. Not a doctor yet.
Okay.
We got a little bit more to go.
Well, we're going to claim it.
Yes, I am a doctoral student. Thank you. We're going to claim it. First, I want to apologize for coming on late, but of course, we have officially gone back to school with students. So my name is Crystal Conigland. I am a teacher, educator, facilitator in Aldine ISD in Texas, Houston, Texas. And I am stuck in the middle of the virtual learning. It is quite challenging. Um, I am blessed to be with a dynamic team that we are working collectively together, and that's why I'm on late, because we went in actually today in the building, but thank God, nothing so far as getting infected or with COVID. I can bring my experience. I've been in education for 19 years, and I would tell you this is probably one of the most challenging years that I've ever had, out of being, especially being in the middle of the pandemic. As most of you know, if you follow Houston and you follow the demographics and the zip code, my particular district is the district that's getting hit the hardest. We are trying to go one-to-one with technology. We're trying to provide those services to the students, but with funding and waiting and trying to get those computers to those students, it is quite challenging. Houston does not have all of the resources that places like Atlanta or California and New York may have, but I can truly say that it is something to reflect on.
Well, can you talk
Without
about
getting emotional, can you repeat that?
and I think we have a little bit of a delay between.
I can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you talk a little
Yes,
bit?
I can hear you.
What are some of the things that you all have in place to mitigate the challenges? In other words, to make it a little bit easier for the students and for the parents. And also, what grade level are you currently teaching?
Currently, I am in the middle school, and some of the things that we do have in place to lessen some of the burden on the parents is that we are now offering hotspots. We're actually having our buses go to particular areas in the district and parking that will allow our students to have accessibility to the Wi-Fi services. We have actually partnered with one of our local colleges that is allowing the students to come into their computer labs and be able to do the work. We're offering parent workshops to be able to help parents to understand, the procedures and dealing with some of the websites that we're working with. One of the websites that we have is called Schoology, and we are offering parent workshops, parent universities, which parents can come in and they can get, directions on how to help their children effectively at home. So we're doing all that we can to make sure these parents are being actively engaged with their children at home. I do know that there are some other avenues that we're trying to take that my superintendent, Dr. LaTanya Goffney, is trying to implement, reading academies, trying to get, other organizations to get involved. Some of the organizations that I belong to, we are looking at trying to make, some home visits that are within the realm of being safe. Trying to get a couple of teachers to get on board to offer some homeschool activities that, that can align with the curriculum that's being offered in the district. We still have a long way to go, but right now our main goal is making sure students can log on, make sure they have accessibility to the Wi-Fi. And I can truly say that our district is doing all that they can, especially by providing the buses to go to particular areas in Aldine to be able to offer those Wi-Fi services.
I see, and I didn't think about the whole aspect of doing
also
so that you could, provide some resources or some homeschooling. Mm-hmm. I guess that would be like after hours. That's a great methodology that could be used to help support parents. Now, ladies, this is a discussion. So if you, it's not a one person take turns. If you hear something, or if I say something, or if somebody else says something that you feel like you want to add something, you want to support what they say, or you, even if you want to contrast what they're saying, this is a discussion. So please feel free to, to offer any insight into what you're hearing, especially for Dr. Strong, Green, and Lewis, because you guys are actually on the forefront of teaching and developing. You're training people to teach and develop methodologies, and Dr. Strong, Green in particular, what you do impacts, like you said earlier, what the state does. So it, feel free to add your perspective, because Miss Conigland, I'm gonna go ahead and claim Dr. Conigland and Miss Dorsey. The two of you are, basically in the fields, and you're doing great things. So that's part of the reason why we have this show, is so that you guys can offer your insight and your perspective. Lisa, I think earlier you started talking about some other online learning methodologies that you're using, that you're enlisting in the classroom. It sounded great. Does anybody else have any methodologies that they wanted to offer?
So I don't have a specific methodology, but I do have a resource I would like to recommend, and I'm all about the preface. So I also want to preface it with this statement, which seems counterintuitive to hear from a person working in distance education, but we have to be very mindful that we're not using technology just for technology's sake. There are certain parts of this situation that require technology. We need to be able to virtually see our students. We need to be able to digitally submit work, but we have to be very cognizant about the amount of resources and things that we pull into classrooms for students, because you don't want to spread their cognitive load too thin, right? Like I saw a meme the other day that was like a 5-year-old sitting at a computer, and she looked like she had worked 40 hours. And underneath it, it said, when it's your first day of kindergarten and they already expect you to know how to log in, email, and send a message. And I think what that highlights is that if students are overly engaged in learning the technology, then they're not engaged enough in learning the skill set that you're focused on. So I'm a proponent of using technology and using publisher resources and using these websites, but not at the expense of spreading the student's ability to learn or process the information too much. And I think you see that a lot with educators, especially because there's been such a short amount of turnaround time to prepare. So, you're getting frustrated learning Google Classroom and iStream and Blackboard and Canvas and Bitmojis, but you got to take into consideration that your student is going to run into that same issue, and they're not going to have the emotional maturity or the resilience that you may have. So if there are ways to focus things or keep them funneled into a certain set of technology, I always recommend that. The actual resource I was going to recommend was a book. I want to say it's by Elizabeth Barkley. I'm not 100% sure, but it's called Student Engagement Techniques. And the thing I love about this book is when I was actively in the classroom, I was teaching, like 7 composition classes, which that just has a notoriously high take home load. So like there's a lot of essay grading when you're grading 6 essays written by 30 students in 7 classes. And so I was trying to find ways to come up with other ways of getting my students interested that were not going to be time intensive for me on the front end. So something that didn't require 3 hours for me to build so that I could use it for 1 hour in the classroom. And the thing about that book is in the back of it, there's like a survey, and it asks you, which of these things is most important to you? And then based on it, you get a score. And the scores are used to analyze these student engagement techniques. And there's literally step-by-step directions in the back of the book. So it'll say something like, hey, this engagement technique is really good if you're trying to get people to analyze. It's called a process analysis log. Here's an example of it. Here's where someone used it in an English classroom. Here's where someone used it in a nursing classroom. Here are the steps of setting it up. And the thing I think would be most useful about it now is it actually, it indexes how well these activities transition into an online environment. So it's like, hey, this is not something that you're going to want to try and do if you're in a digital situation where this may be perfect for this particular learning outcome. So I think being able to kind of realize that while the situation is unique, our challenges aren't unique, it is really important. Because I'm keenly aware that a lot of people are frustrated, I know other people are doing things about this, and I want to look and lean into their expertise. And so that's the book. So I'm so glad that I actually attributed it to the right author. But it's a great resource, and I'm glad that I was smart enough to tell myself, I know I'm not the only person frustrated trying to figure this out. Let me find some experts and let me see what these experts are doing so that I'm not over here reinventing the wheel when I need to be taking that time to focus on helping to engage my students. So I would strongly, strongly recommend that resource.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even though that resource is tailored for the college, a lot of those techniques could probably be used with school age, especially high school kids.
And they have a separate book there's a book on assessment, and then there's a book on engagement. And I think it's important to recognize those as two different things, like that social presence in a classroom that's required versus how I'm assessing learning. And I would say that a lot of it really does translate well into a K through 12 environment.
I also wanted to add about.
Go ahead.
About mindfulness activities for students. Just making sure that the students as well as the teachers make sure that, all this online learning can be stressful. And in addition to the online learning, just hearing about the pandemic on the news and the racial unrest and things that are going on politically, that also we just take moments of mindfulness to just breathe, and teaching children how to be calm and practice mindfulness. And there's a few apps out there that are great resources for students and teachers. One is Calm. There is a cost to that. There's another one called Headspace. There's a lot of yoga videos out there. Children are into this cosmic yoga. You can look that up on YouTube. Those are free videos. But just creating instances for students to kind of take a woosah and take a breather away from the online learning and just have some reflective time. And then also providing reflective activities for them. So as Dr. Strong Green said, the distance learning part of it is great, but there are other avenues to learning. And one would also be like through reflective journal activities and maybe a book club, but just incorporating those mindfulness activities and other reflective opportunities in addition to the online learning.
And I would like to add that with that, we are implementing here Calm Classroom in Duval County. And so with the Calm Classroom, it's 3 to 5 minutes breathing techniques, focusing techniques that we'll do with the students 2 to 3 times per day so that they can have that time to reflect. And last spring, when we started the virtual learning, one of the things I wanted to do, because I really do believe in teaching the whole child, and we have to teach our kids to take care of themselves mentally, as well as the academics. They need to know how to just, like you said, take a breather, Dr. Lewis. We have to do that. And so one of the things I did also, which didn't cost me anything, I didn't have to have a subscription. I didn't need to wait for the district to do anything, but we used Microsoft Teams. And so I created a channel for brain breaks. And I opened up my classroom every morning with a morning meeting just to say good morning to my students. So just offering them that to say, hey, good morning. How was your night? How are you feeling? A lot of the students really appreciated that because that was their time to talk and get that out before we actually started instruction. And then the Brain Breaks channel allowed them, as they were working throughout the day, they can go to that channel and log in and see a video. I just uploaded YouTube videos on the dance from We and all of those other videos that they could do on their own. And I had so many students just responding saying, "Hey, Ms. Dorsey, I really enjoyed the brain break today. Okay, I'm ready for my writing assignment." You know, things like that that they were able to do to kind of get them back focused. And it didn't cost me anything, but just to hear from them that they actually enjoyed it. And then to make it a little bit more engaging, I put it on a choice board so that they can pick and choose which one they wanted to do. So offering them those varieties and different ways of engagement was really beneficial. And so I felt like more of my students were involved than they were, sometimes in the brick and mortar, because we felt like we were always rushed in the brick and mortar. So we had an opportunity to kind of slow down and, work at our own pace,
Dr. Dorsey, you said something that's so important that I feel that people might be missing about this pandemic, and that is that it's important to take this opportunity to slow down as well. So, a lot of my research has dealt with students in transition, whether it's transitioning from high school to college, transferring between institutions, and the bulk of the research says exactly what you said. People don't quit school because it's hard. They quit because they do not feel like they are part of a community. And in the case of college students, we've seen a real skills gap develop for first generation college students, where they're coming to school, they're not able to test in at college level ready courses, and they end up in remedial courses that either require them to take longer to finish their degree and they end up washing out, or they make it so prohibitively expensive that those students can't have access to that opportunity. And so I don't want to use the word excited, because there's nothing about the pandemic that I'm excited about. But the silver lining in my mind is this is the opportunity to go back and claim those students that would have fallen into that skills gap. People who needed more time to process or learn something, who needed more practice, who were not going to get that material as quickly as they would have in a brick and mortar, and would have just become disengaged and fallen behind. So I know for every educator that's stressed out trying to find 12,000 ways to engage 8,000 personalities, that here's one more thing is probably not like at the top of their agenda. But I really do hope people will see this as the opportunity to go after the most vulnerable students that we have and make sure that they cross the finish line as well.
I love this. This good.
That's my soapbox. Sorry.
Crystal, were you getting ready to say something?
May I please intercede? Yes. I want to chime in on Yes. Am I coming across? Can you hear? Okay. I want to chime in on Dr. Strong and also the educator from Duval. First, I want to do a I want to go back and to discuss what you were talking about with the students being involved in digital learning and not getting too overwhelmed with the digital learning. I do know that, of course, the digital learning can be overwhelming, and we are faced with an issue that basically that's the only resource that we have. In our particular district, we have taken a course on social emotional learning, and we have embedded those identified elements of social emotional learning into our actual lesson cycle. And that is to address, things as simple as the educator from Duval stated, how was your day? Can you, or do you want to, just briefly discuss, how do you feel at this particular moment? How has this impacted your life? So it depends on where you are going as far as how well connected you want to be to the students, how well you want to even connect your own feelings with what's going on with the student. I feel that building those relationships with the students, that is going to be the biggest hurdle. Yes, you have the student that is actually being forced to be in front of the computer, sometimes 24 or 40 hours a day or whatever. And that's an exaggerated amount of hours. But in essence, it is what you bring to the table, how well you are well versed into facilitating that instruction. What we have decided to do on our particular campus is that even though we have these lessons that are supposed to be taught in the classroom, we've given them the platform of do as much as you can and be as productive as you can. We have not set a time limit to where you have to have this assignment turned in by this particular time. We want them to get the work done, but we want to do it at their own pace. And plus, we're looking at students that have 2, 3, 4, 5 students that are in the same household. We were not able to do the one-to-one because, of course, we do not have the funding. But even though we feel that we don't want the child in front of the computer, we cannot relay that type of feeling to them. We cannot, and we cannot basically let them know how frustrated we are. So that social emotional piece is very, very important. I think all teachers need to take some type of social emotional learning course, because as with myself, I'm dealing with a daughter that just graduated from college. She is a COVID graduate. She is a athlete that is supposed to be overseas playing basketball right now. She's also an athlete that was offered several graduate assistants to go back to get her master's. So when you are a parent that's dealing with that, it makes me have more empathy for my students when I'm actively engaging with them on a daily basis with that computer. We don't have anything else, so we have to make the best of what we have. But that social emotional piece, that is detriment to helping them get through this pandemic. And even though there's nothing exciting about it, I always try to look at the other side of it. I always try to find a silver lining, because we're still here. We're still breathing. They're still here. They're still breathing. So that's excitement enough for me. And as long as I can, communicate with those kids daily and be professional about it, we're going to be okay. And I'll share this. I had my first group assignment where we collectively talked with each other. And the first thing that the student said to me, "I love your pearls." After all that she had been through for these last couple of months, that's the first thing she saw. So these students want to see the professionals that they saw before they left in March. And if we can put that in the back of our head to give them the most and the best that we can, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That's all I have to say.
It definitely will be okay, because and that's why we have dialogues and conversations like these, because this is still a learning curve for the realm of education. And so the data on whether or not, on how effective we are at what we're doing right now is still, in the making. And so as we look at and we measure our performance as educators, then I think we'll get a little bit better in terms of doing what we do. And finally, one thing when we talk about measurement, what we've used traditionally are the standardized tests to measure the performance or the level of understanding that we've done in education. We've used standardized testing. And so what about standardized testing now in this particular context? We're learning virtually. Dr. Stronggreen, you said something earlier about adjusting our expectations on the outcomes. And so what about the standardized test? Will we But is that something that we need to be talking about? School systems need to be talking about now, or will we be able to administer them the same way? Will we be able to have the same scoring systems? The floor is open for educators to chime in on that for you guys.
I think, unfortunately, I don't think, at least in my district, I don't think that we have addressed that well. I think to your point about involving the community, especially the church and other organizations, is going to be critical when we look to for standardized testing. Here we are still planning to do testing. We are preparing for next week for our benchmark testing to see where the students are, as we always do at the start of fall. But that piece of how valid those scores will be, because the students are at home, and we cannot force them to turn on cameras where we can monitor the test taking process, is going to, really impact how valid the test scores are. And then it also will impact the teacher's evaluation. So that's a whole nother piece that we're looking at. And so I do think that we need to look to the higher education system that has already been using outside sources for assessment and how we're going to test at the K-12 level, because at the K-12 level, we have not mastered that yet. At the higher education level, of course, students go into a center. They're social distance because they're in their own pod to be able to test, and they have that monitor there. But we have not yet done that at the K-12 level. And so I think we do need to, I think that's one of the things at the K-12 level that I wish we would do better at, and that is planning across the levels where they're actually having effective conversations with higher education. And how is this happening? Because they have been doing distance learning for a while. Even some of the private distance learning companies like K-12 Online, they've already mastered those things. So I'm just not sure why we aren't bringing in those other organizations for us to have that conversation and not start from scratch. Some of the things that we know we need to do. Because in order for our students to matriculate to higher education, we need them to be able to test and actually enter into college at that level. Well, if the colleges are already testing, then why aren't we having that conversation with them to set up systems where we can test effectively?
Gotcha.
I will say, in response to Lisa's comments, that in Georgia, we have something called the P20 Collaborative, pre-K to the end of college. And the P20 Collaborative is broken down into clusters. So in the Metro Atlanta area, I'm in the Metro Atlanta P20 Collaborative. And we've been meeting probably about the last 4 or 5 years. And I feel like they've been really beneficial conversations to hear the needs of both entities of P12 and college communities, and the resources that we each have to offer and can benefit each other. So I think that's been a really great tool in the state of Georgia to have those P20 collaboratives. And we meet maybe 3 times a year. Then also in response to Dr. White, in Georgia, the Georgia milestones have been waived for the 2021 academic year. Then I know a lot of the colleges are also having conversations about admissions and whether or not ACT and SAT scores will be mandated in admissions applications for the fall. And I'm one that I'm not the hugest proponent of standardized testing, but I know that's probably a discussion for another day. And so I am not that unhappy that the standardized testing has gone away, because I think that for at least this year, because I think that there should be multiple measures of assessing a student, and sometimes I use this example with my college students who are becoming educators. The Georgia milestones and all these other standardized tests is a snapshot of one day. And I feel like there should be multiple measures. So for example, if you have this child who is coming to school on test day and they woke up late, their mom screamed at them, they missed breakfast, they had to walk to school, it starts raining, they get splashed by a puddle, like all these things happen on the way for them to get to school. And then they get to school late, they can't take the test with their teacher, they have to have a substitute teacher give them the test in the media center, which is not a familiar person, not a familiar environment, or don't do well on the test. And then the next year, that test, that number is used for their placements. That number follows them in their permanent record folders throughout their education. So I just really feel like there should be multiple measures instead of just a snapshot test score.
Dr. Lewis, we are kindred spirits, because I have a love-hate relationship with standardized testing and accreditation of any kind. I think it's important because, we want a baseline skill set. We want to know that you are capable of doing these things. But standardized testing has been historically flawed. It hurts certain demographics and populations. And so I was really excited to see a lot of institutions shifting to a place where they're using admissions matrices instead of just the standardized test as a way of benchmarking where you belong in that college environment. I do think that I'm very fortunate because I actually work at an open access institution, and I firmly believe that college is everyone's right. You might not all need to go to college, but you have the right to try. And so for us, we use multiple ways, or we use different models of testing to figure out where students go. And so I think that kind of mentality needs to become much more prevalent, that it's not just one thing. Maybe if you were taking AP writing classes, then, or if you scored really well on the Compass, or if you took an in-house writing test, like I am a fan of using different ways of figuring out whether or not a person is ready for whatever the next challenge is. I think the other thing we have to be careful of, though, is the exit measure of this testing, at least in higher education, because for a lot of our students, these are required credentials. Like, you have to pass this test in order to be a welder, or you have to pass this test in order to be a nurse. And seeing delays in the administration of those tests are really hurting people. And overall, it's hurting the workforce, because these are people who are ready to work and who cannot get into the workforce because they haven't jumped through this last hoop. So using things like Respondus or, remote proctoring helps, but I'm hoping that people will begin to take into consideration things like being able to do, part on the job training, or to be able to substitute out that testing requirement through a probationary period or something of that nature, so that we don't see testing becoming the hurdle that keeps people from reaching their ultimate long-term education goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So will we still, so if we don't use our standardized testing, the traditional standardized testing we have been using, will the school systems and colleges and universities be more intentional on these other forms of measurement, or has the conversation not even come up yet?
I think you're already seeing that happen, especially in colleges that are starting things like first-year programs, where that entire first-year experience is becoming more cultivated for students, because we understand that's a huge transition, and we don't want to see students, fall off of the educational pipeline. So I think in thinking about a student's first year experience, and really those first couple pivotal weeks at the college, that a lot of that is going, hey, let's get you into this test. Let's see if this is where you really need to be. Let's have more proactive counseling, not waiting for you to come to me, but me talking to you about here's what you need to be doing. Here's when you need to be scheduling those testings. And I think that sort of started with looking at how people were admitted to graduate schools and programs, and that it's finally making its way back into just how we accept them into college overall.
Okay.
I think that at the K-12 level, I think that the standardized tests are attached to teacher evaluations right now. And so I don't see them as going away because they have not yet figured out another way to evaluate teachers. When they have another system in place to evaluate and assess teachers for salary increases, then you'll see possibly a shift in standardized testing. But because it is attached to teacher evaluations, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not a big proponent of standardized testing for punitive reasons. I do think we need to have testing just so that we can see where the students are, but I don't feel that we have done a well enough job with aligning the standards-based instruction with the evaluation method for students. I don't think we've meshed those well together because we have standards-based instruction, but we have paper pencil assessment. And it's difficult for our students, especially our ESE students. It's difficult for them to perform on a grade level assessment when they are below grade level. It's difficult for our gifted students who are working above grade level to test on grade level. They are not still showing truly where they are. And so I don't think we've done a well enough job in that area. And until we can first address how teachers are assessed separately and take that away from the student, because I feel like in some ways we are holding the students accountable for how we assess the teacher, and that's why the standardized testing is still in place. And so we need to kind of look at those areas separately.
Absolutely. Now, and I would say that they need to at least. Oh, go ahead, Crystal. Go ahead.
May I ask a question to Lisa in Duval County?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I hate this this delay. I want to address Lisa in Duval County. Did I understand you correctly by stating that standardized testing is attached to the teacher's evaluation or the student? When you say teacher evaluation, are you talking about the end of year evaluation that will decide if they have a continuing contract?
Yes.
Is that in addition to the test that they have to take in order to get certified to be a teacher?
No. So your certification.
I'm trying to get some clarification on that.
So the student growth. So we measure student growth based on the standardized test.
Yes.
So how much the student grows.
That's the first I've ever heard of. So what type of standard? Okay.
So that is attached to the evaluation. It's actually attached in Georgia up until this year. They only did away with it this year in Georgia
student growth
because of the pandemic. But it's the student growth.
Okay, so you're saying that after you get the
Yeah, we got a serious delay here.
Okay, so it's when you receive the data back from, we got a very serious delay. So when the students get their results back from the state in regards to their end of year testing, the standardized test that you're talking about that is attached to the teacher evaluation is when it shows how much growth the teacher has made with those students, and then they are evaluated on that growth with the student.
Right. So for example, my class of 5th graders, they will take their assessment in
that's the question that I'm asking.
So they will take their assessment in the spring.
Hold on one second.
Still have a delay, I see.
Right. Hold on one second. Okay, Crystal, just hold on one second. We're going to go ahead because I think we may be getting just a little bit away from because we wanted to offer some resources for students. Just 1 second, Crystal and Lisa. And so I think we've done a great, outstanding job. Dr. Strong-Green, Dr. Lewis, Dr. Conigland, Ms. Dorsey. You all have done an excellent excellent job at doing that. And we're going to have this second discussion, which is a very good discussion after the show. So don't go anywhere. We're going to go ahead and close out because we want to be respectful of our viewers, because now we're at an hour and 15, and this is a juicy subject. So we're going to probably still have, I just had a show, we had the show last week. We're having another one tonight, and we'll probably have another one very soon after this, because this is an evolving issue. And, as we go along and build our wings on the way down, we'll get better and better at this. So thank you all for listening. A special thanks to Kisa Public Radio. And as we leave you, please remember those famous words by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. Okay. Good night, everybody. I need all my panelists to stay.
What's poppin'? Miss Evans on the beat, so tap in. You got options, but you better pass my class, no flopping. Gon' log in every day, every morning I'm watching. Yeah, we virtual and you know it's up, so we about to take it up a notch. Yeah, my role is the best, no comparing.